The MVS architecture lets you store elaborate setups and effects, but sometimes all you need is the ability to remember a few simple keystrokes. The macro function helps you do just that. All right, so what we're going to do here is I have two newscasters, her and him. What I want to do is every time I put frame memory 1 on the air, I want it to automatically call up and put her name on, and when I call his up, I want his name to come on. So we're going to use a macro for that. So we're going to go up to my multifunction module, and we're going to go into the macro mode. And I want to store this on macro number 41. So we have to create one for each person. So what I'm going to do is exit out of the recall menu, and I'm going to go over here to macro 41 and see how it says empty. As soon as I hit enter, it's going to throw me into the record mode. And you can look up here, and it says macro 41, 0 of 0. So I have no steps in my macro at all. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go to DSK1, and I want to select frame memory 3. Notice as soon as I did that, I got one step on my macro. I'm also going to come over to DSK1, and I'm going to put the key in. Now I have 2 steps. Now that's all I want this macro to do. So I'm going to hit store, and it's giving me a chance to change the number or change my mind. Nope, I'm going to hit enter. So now it's on 41. And if I go back to direct mode, there's my macro. It's all set as macro 41. Now let's make another one over here for my other male counterpart. So again, we're going to exit out of the recall mode, and we're going to select 42. We're going to hit enter, throws me into record mode, and I have no steps. And on this case, on DSK1, I'm going to select frame memory 5, and I'm going to turn the key back on again. So now we have his title. Again, notice that I have 2 steps. I'm going to hit store. Again, gives me a chance to change my mind, and I'm going to hit 42. Now if we go to the direct mode, I've got 2 macros right here. Now, as I change these, it's simply changing down here what keyer is on the air. And it's also making sure that the downstream key is turned on. Let me show you exactly what's happening. I'm going to go into the macro menu by hitting my top menu and hitting macro. You can see macro 41 and 42 are both highlighted. Let's go to macro 41, and I'm going to hit this button called offline edit. This is going to show me exactly what the macro is doing. So what we have here is we have kind of an event step. So we look here on event 1, the contents is an event. What is the event? Well, the event is an ME crosspoint change. Which ME? Program preset. You can see that in both places here. Which bus? The key 1 bus. Which crosspoint? It's going to be crosspoint 41 right here. Or is it video or key? In this case, it's video. The next step is, again, the contents is an event. The event this time is a key cut. Which ME? Program preset. Which key? Key 1. And the direction. In this case, it's saying I always want the key to cut to on. So what that means is if the key was off, it'll always make it go on. If the key was already on, it's not going to turn it off. It'll just leave it in the on position. All right, so now that we kind of understand what these macros are doing, let's exit out of here. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to attach these macros to the frame memory crosspoint button. So when I call it up, this does it automatically. To attach a macro, we recall the macro first. Now that doesn't matter that that's the wrong background. We'll deal with that later. So up here on my delegate row, next to DSK4, I've added 3 buttons: pre-macro, post-macro, and macro attach enable. Now by default, the pre, post, macro, and macro attach buttons are not on the panel. We have to assign those, if we want to use them, through the setup menu. So I'm going to go up here to the main menu, and I'm going to go to engineering setup, and I'm going to go to panel operation, and it's under this one called key aux function assign. Now what this is setting are the individual buttons on each delegate row for each ME. So over here on program preset, right after key 4, I want to assign this to be pre-macro. The next button I want to be post-macro, and this one I want to be macro attach enable. Now shipping in the switcher box are the labels that you can manually put in by yourself. So the first thing we're going to do is I want to attach this by selecting either pre or post. Now pre-macro means that the macro is going to run in its entirety before the crosspoint changes. Post-macro means that the crosspoint is going to change first, then the macro is going to run. Now in this case it doesn't matter because all the steps of the macro are happening instantaneously. So we're going to go over here and select post-macro, and I'm going to hold this button down. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to press the frame memory 1 button. Notice it starts to blink. That's because I just programmed a macro attachment to there. I'm going to let it go and it's going to stop blinking. Then we're going to come over and select macro 42. Again, I'm going to hold down post macro, and this time, remember macro 42 is going to go with frame memory 2, which is Mario, and I'm going to hit that button. Now, 2 of them are blinking to tell me that I have 2 post macro attachments. Okay, the last thing we got to do is we got to tell the switcher that it's okay to fire the macro whenever I press these buttons. So if I turn this off now, nothing happens. I'm going to press this button next to pre and post called macro attach enable. I'm going to turn that on and watch what happens. As soon as I hit frame memory 2, his key automatically comes on with the correct super. When I hit frame memory 1, her key comes on with the correct super. So I could easily lose my key, go over here to a tape. When I come back to her, her name comes up every time. I can lose her super, she can talk for a second, and I can go to the next anchor, he talks, and I can lose his key. Now let's try a different kind of macro. This time when I call up frame memory 7, I want it to call up my rotating MVS 3000 logo. Now to do this, we have to do this entirely inside the macro menu. So now I'm going to come in here and select macro 43. Now notice it's empty and it's dimmed. It's empty because of the E. So I'm going to go to offline edit and there's nothing here. The reason we can't build this on the panel is there's no way to call up a frame memory from the panel. It's only from the menu. So we're going to set an event. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to select event and we're going to hit set. Then all the way down here at the bottom, I happen to know clip recall is number 40 and I'm going to hit set. And it's going to ask me which frame memory do I want to call it up in. So we're going to go to frame memory 7. I'm going to hit set. It's asking me, do I want to call up only frame memory 7 or do I want to call up 7 and 8 as a pair? I'm going to do a pair. Now it wants to know what the clip name is. So I'm going to hit set and it's going to pop up here. Now it's very important. Clip names are case sensitive. So I happen to know, just because I've used it many, many times, that it's lowercase for the name of this. So I'm going to type in loop in lowercase letters and hit enter. Now I'm going to hit store, and again, it's going to give me a chance to change my mind of where I want to store it. I'm going to hit enter. All right, so if I go to frame memory 7 here, you can see I've got some kind of old graphic that I had up. As soon as I come up to my multifunction module and I recall macro 43, it's going to call up the clip. Now notice the clip isn't running. Well, we didn't tell it to run. On a macro, you have to be very specific of every single thing that you want the switcher to do. So we're going to go back into offline edit. See, we only called it up. We didn't tell it to do anything. So we're going to append. We're going to add a new event. We're going to come down here, and we're going to say play. Well, play what? It's asking for the device. In this case, I want to play frame memory 7, and I want to play it in normal mode. So now let's go ahead and store it again and say enter. Now let's go ahead and recall this again, and it starts to play it. And it stops. Again, we have to be very specific about what we want it to do. So let's go back in here again, and between the clip recall and play, I need to turn on frame memory loop. So we're going to insert before, we're going to add an event, and very close to the bottom, I happen to know it's there because I've done this 100 million times. I'm going to set frame memory loop, and we're going to turn it on for number 7. And we're going to turn it on. Store, enter. Now when I recall 43, it's going to recall it, and it will continue to loop forever and ever. Now we got one more thing to do, and that's make the attachment like we did with the newscasters. So we've already recalled this, so we're going to come down here again, and we're going to say post macro, and we're going to set it on frame memory 7. So with our macro attach enabled, if I hit frame memory 1 right here, and I hit frame memory 2, there's Mario, and I hit frame, let's lose his key, and I hit frame memory 7, boom, it immediately starts automatically when I press the frame memory 7 button. Now that only scratched the surface of panel macros. There's a whole lot more you can do with them. Now I want to talk about menu macros. Now a menu macro is really good for things that, well, don't appear on the panel anywhere, that can only be accessed from the menu. So let's go over to the macro menu and go into menu macros. Now I've already built one of these, and we're going to build a second one right now. And what I want to do is have 2 menu macros that let me change the display of my multi-viewer. So right here is my default that I've been using for this whole presentation. I want to make a new one now. So we're going to select a blank register, and I'm going to go into menu macro edit. Okay, now as soon as I do this, I'm already in the edit mode and it's ready for me to do anything. However, very important, the first thing I want to do is I want to come down here and set my interval time to 0. That means that it's going to run everything as fast as it can. By default, it's at half a second so that setup things don't step on each other. But in this case, it's not a big deal. So now I'm going to go into here, into the setup menu. I'm going to go to Switcher, Multi-Viewer. Now you can see that my normal keyframe area up at the upper right-hand corner here has been replaced with a menu macro. That's my indication that I'm in the menu macro edit mode. Also down on the lower right, it's warning me that I also have menu macro auto insert on, meaning if I touch anything on the menu that's a button, it's going to insert a step for me. So in this case, I want to go and change my sources. So let's pretend I don't have 2 monitors anymore, and I want to use a single monitor for program preset and everything else with my multi-viewer. So in my upper left, I'm going to go over here and select Program Preset Preview because I like preview on the left. And on the right hand, I'm going to select Program Preset Program 1. So this is going to give me preview and program. And now let's go here and say I want my cameras towards the bottom. So I'm going to come down here and select a source this time. And I'm going to select XDCam 1 here, XDCam 2 here, XDCam 3 here, and XDCam 4 here. And up on the top, I want to put a couple of my frame memories. So we're going to come over here and say frame memory 1, frame memory 3, frame memory 5, and frame memory 7. So now you can see that I've got 12 events up here in the upper right-hand corner that will change the layout of this display for me. Now, I don't want to have to go hunting for the menu macro place anymore, so I'm just going to hit this little shortcut called Menu Macro Edit, and it pops me right back to the menu here. So now I'm going to say Store, Enter. So now I have both menu macros, and I'm going to go ahead and rename this one and call it MView2. So let's clear this and call it MView2. All right, so I have 1 and 2. And now I'm going to go ahead and recall them. So I'm going to select this here and recall number 1, and it instantly changed my multi-viewer. And now if I go to number 2, the one we just made, it changes the entire multi-viewer again. And I can go back and forth at any time I want to. Now I'm going to show you one more trick on macros. I can take a menu macro and put it inside a panel macro register. This will let me use the multifunction module to recall my multi-viewer changes. All right, so I'm going to do this by going back into my macro registers, and let's go ahead and make macro 47 since it'll be at the top of the multifunction module. We're going to do an offline edit, and we're going to set an event. And somewhere right here in about there, on number 38, we're going to set the register. Now I'm going to set this to register 1 and hit set and store. So whenever I call this up, it's going to call menu macro number 1. And I'm going to go to 48, do an offline edit, and do the same thing. We're going to go down to number 38, hit set, and do register number 2. Store that. Now, if I come over here to my multifunction module, here's macro 47 and 48. When I hit this, it stays the same. When I hit this one, it changes the multi-viewer. When I hit this one, it goes back. And of course, don't forget, we can rename our macro buttons. So if I go to 47 and hit rename, we're going to call this MV, I'm going to use the pipe symbol like I showed you before to cause a carriage return, 1. And I'm going to come over here and rename this to be MV, pipe symbol, 2. Now up here is now telling me in plain English what multi-viewer 2 is going to do and what multi-viewer 1 is going to do.